Hello everyone, it's Hannah here from Virtually Fluent. Welcome to today's video where we will be doing a film review of one of the most successful British films, which is The King's Speech. Today I'll be giving this video in the form of a film review so that you can learn all of that key cinema and film vocabulary. But if you want to learn even more in this particular topic, we do have a supporting course. I've left the link in the description below. So, The King's Speech is a historical drama. It was released back in 2011 in the UK, although it premiered over in the US slightly earlier in 2010. It was directed by Tom Hooper. The screenplay was written by David Seidler, and it was produced by Ian Canning, Emil Sherman, and Gareth Unwin. Apologies for bad pronunciation of names. So, The King's Speech is actually based on real-life events of the British royal family. So, the plot kind of follows the abdication of Edward VIII back in 1936, who left the role for his American love. And this leads to the ascent to the throne of his younger brother, George VI, who is actually the father of our current head of state, our current Queen, Elizabeth II. Now, George VI was obviously pushed into the role very quickly. He actually had a speech impediment. He was very uncomfortable giving speeches, didn't really enjoy speaking publicly. Now, the whole plot really focuses on one particular relationship, and that is between George VI and his speech therapist, Lionel Logue, and how they work together, particularly to prepare for one really important speech which was broadcast over the radio in 1939, and this was the declaration of the UK going to war, the Second World War. So the two main characters are obviously the King, George VI, who is played by Colin Firth, and Geoffrey Rush, who plays Lionel Logue, the speech therapist. And there are lots of other great supporting actors too. You have Helena Bonham Carter, who plays the wife of George VI, and lots of really other great supporting actors too. So definitely worth a watch. Now, the film is mostly set in London. I would say that the two main areas would be Buckingham Palace and the speech, or the studio that the speech therapist uses. And most of it was shot on location, but not those locations. They used Ely Cathedral to represent Westminster Abbey. They used parts of Lancaster House to represent the insides of Buckingham Palace, and lots of other sort of magnificent buildings to give off this idea that they lived and worked in Buckingham Palace. So there were lots of places involved, but it was all filmed and recorded here in the UK. Now, the writer David Seidler also had a stutter when he was younger, so had quite a personal connection to this character that he was writing about, George VI. Now, the writer was totally fascinated by this rather unusual relationship between these two protagonists. King George VI, who's the head of state of a huge country, the United Kingdom, and a speech therapist who's originally from Australia. Two very different characters who have a very interesting relationship. And in real life, they did both actually remain friends until the King's death in 1952. Now, this film was a box office hit on all fronts, and not just here in the UK. The directing, the producing, the musical score, the acting, just on all fronts, it was super successful. So they received 12 Oscar nominations the year after it was released, and they won 4 of those, including the big prizes, really. They got Best Picture. Colin Firth won Best Actor. They also got Best Director, Best Screenplay. It won nominations and awards at the BAFTAs, the Golden Globes, the Screen Actors Guild Awards. It won the People's Choice Award in 2010, and it was just generally a huge success across all fronts. Although, interestingly, it wasn't really a big budget film. So the film was originally made for just £8 million, although that did turn into a rather profitable £250 million. Even in the first weekend alone here in Great Britain and Ireland, it made £3.5 million, and it remained the most successful film in the box office for 4 weekends running. And it wasn't just here in the UK that it was quite successful. Also in the US and over in Australia, it was equally successful. It was given 94% on Rotten Tomatoes. So a few of the reasons why I really liked this film, firstly is that in terms of learning a language, and I know this from learning languages myself, it's not just the vocabulary and the grammar that you need to learn, but also the culture. And by watching a film like this, you can really learn a lot about the British culture. You can hear the particular names of the royal family in the UK, and this is something that a lot of British people know about. You learn a lot about background events. You have Winston Churchill, you have going to the Second World War, you have the British Empire exhibition at Wembley Stadium. You have all these background events in the film that can really help you learn a lot more about the British culture. And even English literature, they use in one of the speech therapy sessions, they use some of Hamlet's very famous soliloquy, "To be or not to be, that is the question." So there's really a lot that you can learn just by watching this film. Something that you will notice in this film is that the speech therapist, Lionel Lowe, doesn't use these traditional methods. You'll see that King George VI goes through a series of different speech therapists and just never really gets on with one because they use all those traditional methods, and Lionel Lowe doesn't do that. And that's something that I very closely relate to, kind of adapting to the customer and being able to use modern methods of language learning. So for me, that's something that I really believe in, and it's nice to see that in the film. And a really good message is given throughout this film here, that no matter what is standing in your way, you just don't give up. Which sounds extremely cheesy, but it's actually really true. You'll see that George VI gets to these points where he just doesn't want to continue at something that is too difficult to overcome the speech impediment, and by the end he does reach his goal and he does end up speaking relatively well. It really takes you on that sort of roller coaster of emotions when you do want to give up, and you see that King George VI fights back and says, no, I can't do this, and yet once Lionel Lowe has recorded him and he listens back to a recording of himself, he realises he's actually doing pretty well and can't really hear anything such as a speech impediment when he's talking. And as both a language learner and a language teacher, I've been in both of those positions. I'm also a huge fan of music, particularly film music and soundtracks, and this film really does have some great stuff. So the score was composed through Decca Records. And something that the composer was really aware of is the sort of lack of voice that this message that the film is trying to convey. And I think he reflects that really nicely through the music, with these sort of individual notes played throughout before it starts building up with more notes as his speech improves throughout the film. So it's a nice message through the music too. This was also nominated for Best Original Score at the Oscars, at the BAFTAs, at the Golden Globes, and it even won a Grammy too, so pretty good soundtrack. So all in all, I really enjoyed the film. It's definitely worth a watch if you want to learn a little bit about the process of speaking English, learning a language, especially if you come from that speech impediment background, and of course a little bit of British culture along the way too. If you learned some new vocabulary today talking about films, giving a film review, go ahead and give today's video a like. You can also subscribe to my YouTube channel, and don't forget to turn notifications on to see lots more videos, not just like this one with vocabulary, but also grammar explanations, pronunciation explanations. And it's not just on YouTube. You can find me across all social media channels. I've left all those links in the description below. This is Hannah from Virtually Fluent, bringing English to life.